Welcome back to Sidewalk, Skyline. I'm your host Kevin Rogers, and we're continuing our journey of exploration into Canada's urban centers. So how are you doing? The novelty of a lifestyle shift brought about by a novel virus has us all wondering what's next. Those who have lived sacrificially in service to others are suddenly disconnected and looking for new patterns of meaningful connection. The city I live in, Windsor, has a long history of economic climb and descent and is home to automotive manufacturers. Large layoffs, rising unemployment rates have come and gone many times, and at various intervals people have asked, how's your church doing during the latest layoff or anything like that? And I've often replied by saying, well, a lot of people in my congregation are poor, and during a downturn, things are business as usual for the poor. They're not affected in the same way. Churches that serve the poor will certainly be feeling the same pinch as the rest of the middle class, as our donor base shrinks, as we look at staff layoffs, but perhaps the greatest loss to the marginalized will not be economic, since that wasn't there in the first place. The greatest loss for churches that serve the poor is the opportunity to provide hospitality. You know, it's as if the world right now is in a minimum security jail. We're learning how to live with increased limitation, and that grates against our freedom and against our mobility. Let's pray that none are lost and that our incarceration becomes fruitful. It certainly was for the Apostle Paul. To be in jail, to lose his public freedom, turned to him writing many of the epistles of the New Testament. One of the reasons I started Sidewalk Skyline podcast was to share the incredible eternal wealth that is found in the urban church. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go and meet St. Chad from St. John, New Brunswick. Chad Nickerson is the pastor of Calvary Temple, a historic urban church caring for its city in creative ways. So let's go now to my interview from 2019 with Chad Nickerson. Chad, you're in St. John, New Brunswick, not to be confused with St. John's, Newfoundland. Is there any other derivations on that?
There's some in Quebec and a few other places.
Yeah. So Saint, spelled S-A-I-N-T, and in Newfoundland, S-T, period.
That's it.
There we go. So I've never been to St. John, and I understand that I'm missing out on a wonderful place. So
you are.
Tell me about your city.
St. John, New Brunswick is a beautiful city on the shores of the Bay of Fundy. It's a gorgeous place, coastal place. It has quite a variety of industry. Mm-hmm. We've got Canada's largest oil refinery is in St. John. Mm-hmm. There's a large tissue mill, a large pulp mill. So there's quite a mix of some white-collar workers and a couple of corporate offices that are in office towers downtown, as well as a lot of blue-collar workers, of course, in the mills. Mm-hmm. And then we also have some very high rates of poverty as well.
Mm-hmm. When you think people think of St. John, they think Maritimes, and when people think Maritimes, at least if you're in Ontario or other parts of Canada, you think often of beautiful countryside, and you think of depressed economy. Mm-hmm. And though it's a place of industry, it's probably an on and off place, right? Mm-hmm. Either people are working or everybody's looking for work.
That's right.
Yeah.
My father-in-law is a chartered accountant, and he says, or has said before, that whereas other places in Canada will experience, depressions, sometimes it can feel like the Maritimes are always in a state of some form of depression economically. Mm-hmm. We just, kind of ride it out or whatever. That's what it feels like often, yeah.
Yeah. And you grew up in a little town in the Maritimes. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, small town of about 7,000 people on the southern tip of Nova Scotia, and grew up in a rural spot just outside of that town for most of my
What was it called?
the little village I lived in.
Yeah.
Kelly's Cove.
Kelly's Cove.
Kelly's Cove, and it's a literal cove right around the coast on the southern tip. And so, yeah, my experience, all my growing up years, teen years, was a small town experience, a small church that I was involved in through most of my life, about 30 or 40 people-ish that regularly attended. And so, yeah, very, very rural kind of experience.
And somewhere in those formative years, you fell in love with Jesus, and then somewhere along the line you began to feel this impulse that maybe I'm supposed to become a pastor. So you went from being a small town boy growing up in a place that has not as much urban feel to it. No urban feel to
That's
it.
right.
But now you're in St. John, and so you're pastoring a church there. So tell me about the church that you're pastoring.
I'm the lead pastor of Calvary Temple Church in the inner city, in the city center, the city core. It's our neighborhood where the church is called the South Central Peninsula, and it's just smack dab right in the middle of the large geographical area that's St. John City proper. And it's close to the coast. It's right where all the office towers are, and a lot of some new development of housing and whatnot is popping up right around us. It's right in the heart of everything. I think our building, when you look at a map, our building is just about in the dead center of that whole inner city area.
Well, I hope you're not the dead center.
The living center of that city.
Center.
There you go.
There we go. So give me a church history lesson. Tell me about this church. You've been there 14 years. You came on as a youth pastor, associate pastor, and then 2 years ago, lead pastor. So
That's right.
Take us all the way back. Let's learn about this place.
Well, some church history buffs would probably remember, maybe have heard of the names, the Davis sisters. They came up from Georgia to the St. John area and brought this Pentecostal expression of faith. And so our church came out of that. It's only a congregation of about 55 years, 56 or 7 years in operation, and have always been in the city center. That's where it's always existed. And so it was a drive-in church, basically. Regional church, people drove into our area. It was hopping when it started back in 1965 with David Crabtree as the lead pastor. It was a happening place. They had TV show, a radio show. They ran 1,000 at Sunday school. The building is built to seat 1,000. It was a happening place. They owned a garage to service their fleet of buses back then. It was a real hotspot of Christian ministry. And then over time, culture changes, things change, people change. Even the population of that area in the neighborhood of where our church is declined, and times change. And so generally, over the years, there's been a decline in attendance and even somewhat with the finances as well. And the neighborhood has changed a lot. And so it's at a point now where we're rediscovering ourselves, because we're not what we were. Though we have a lot of people that still attend the church, they're now getting up in years. They're now approaching their 80s, a lot of individuals. And so we are grappling with who we are and what we're supposed to do right now in that area where we are.
I think you're describing a microcosm of many of the churches in Canada that have similar histories, starting in the city core. But as the city changes and people moved out, then the church came under new kinds of pressures. It was no longer the church that you walked to. So in your congregation, if you had to throw a ballpark figure, what percentage of people are driving in and what percentage of people live within, say, a couple kilometers of the church?
I'd say it's probably, off the top of my head, probably 60%-ish of the people aren't within a couple of kilometers of the church. About 40% that
Right.
attend right now are within that radius of our localized area where the church is in the
Yeah.
neighborhood.
Yeah. In a history like the church that it used to be, there's very much of a trajectory of come and see. There's something happening here. But as the church over time has plateaued and declined, that no longer becomes the modus operandi. It becomes more of, we have to reach the world around us. And so is that where your church is at?
Yes, and we're still in that process right now as we speak.
Yeah.
Looking at what needs are there now in the neighborhood around our church, and how can we best meet those needs and help. I mean, we're in a building that is 100 years old this year. It was an old Presbyterian building. It's a great big ark of a thing. So as long as God allows us to be there, how can we best use even that as a service, as a ministry center, as a place to help with practical needs of what people are desperately longing for in our neighborhood?
But what do you think people are longing for?
I think people, in my experience, where we are looking for relationship, meaningful connections, meaningful support, respect, kindness. Ideally and generally, because I am a minister, people, I believe, have a spiritual vacuum in their lives. They're looking for fulfillment of the spiritual part of them as well.
Right.
And I think we have something to offer in that regard.
So there's sounds like a intersection between two worlds, and you have some 80-year-olds in your church, and how do 80-year-olds feel about all this change that's going on? Some of them probably were in this church when they were young, and everything changed. And do they live with the ghost of Christmas past, or are they able to see something new and adapt? What kind of conversations are you having and hearing with those who are in their reclining years?
It's a self-discovery. It's a discovery for every one of us. It's a discovery for me even to assess, who am I, what am I about, and what does my world need around me? And so we're all on this journey together, 80 years old, 60 years old, 50, 40, whatever. Yeah, we're discovering, it's a different day. The old models that I've always relied on, or often have, for Christian ministry aren't necessarily working, especially where I am, like they used to. People think very differently, and they have some concerns, at least in my neighborhood, about Christianity and the church. And so we're trying, as of right now, to, in practical ways, embrace our neighborhood, embrace our community, and serve in practical means. Providing meals. We've started, by the grace of God, some people in our church felt to start a Christian mental health support group, because there was a need there in our neighborhood for listening ears, for kindness, for a little snack.
Tell me a little bit about that support group.
It's totally bizarre. It's God. Lady.
Wait a minute, mental health and totally bizarre in the same sentence?
Shocking. A lady moved to our area, began attending our church, attended our church for about a year or so, and she came to me and said, I have something on my heart that I was involved in another place where I used to live before life changed, and she moved to our area. She said, it's a Christian mental health support group. We use a curriculum that's Christ-centered, but it's discussion-based, it's listening-based, it's encouragement-based, a time of friendship, a time of gathering around tables, sharing a basic meal together to just encourage each other once a week and build connections with those who maybe marginalized, maybe feeling very alone. And so we brought that to the leadership of the church, and they concurred that this was something that was needed. We hadn't heard of really anything like this. So this lady and her husband started this new ministry initiative, oversaw that, and the really strange thing is our mental health professionals are all on board with it. The secular mental health professionals, the government services, as well as different professionals, are recommending people to the program and promoting, putting up our posters and announcing it and spreading the word, even though it's explicitly Christian and Christ-centered.
Yeah.
And we've just seen beautiful growth as people have come to have support, to have acceptance, to have love.
We do not have a good history in churches of understanding people with mood disorders or struggling with mental health. And to hear that something life-giving like that is happening, something that is not just the value of good behavioral therapy, and relearning how to think, those are all valuable tools, but actually to have an opportunity to speak into the spiritual dynamic of a person. It's not all mental, and it's not all spiritual. They work together.
That's right.
Yeah. So I want to hear about the neighborhood that you're in. You're at the live center of the neighborhood. Take me on a 5 senses walking tour around your neighborhood. What am I going to see, smell, hear, taste, touch, feel, whatever?
Sure. We're in an area that's quite densely populated. For our area, it would be the urban center. There's only about probably 2 other boroughs that in our area would somewhat reflect in a smaller fashion the urban dynamic of a lot of businesses, a lot of housing, larger housing complexes.
Most people
or whatever.
don't think urban when they think Maritimes.
It's true.
But you've got a piece of it.
We do. And we'd be the Maritimes' third largest city. And in our neighborhood, we have the Bar District that's about a block away, which makes it fun. It's a pretty happening place. There's a lot of action and things happening, which I really like for some of the events we do, to say, hey, we're here too. We have other things to offer as well. As I said, we have office towers. All of the office towers in our city are within a couple of blocks of us. They're all there. So we have a lot of business people in the week that are coming and going. We've even had some of them now say, hey, you guys are doing some things. We want to volunteer. We want to help out. A lot of restaurants right around us, which make it very difficult to be healthy. I tend to be quite tempted by the awesome savory smells all around me.
It's not into temptation.
I know, it's true. But it's a happening place. We have experienced in our city in the last several years, the stats tell us there's been 2.4% population decrease in our city. But our neighborhood, our localized area where the church is, has experienced something like a 12 or 13% population growth. There's been new condo apartments, new studio apartments are popping up a lot of places just within a block of our church. So there's, as in many other places, a draw of people coming back into our inner city core. And so we are also trying to assess how to minister to people that aren't only impoverished or those who are down and out or struggling, but also some of those folks that a lot of them are young singles, young professionals, young families that are moving into the neighborhood as well.
You know it's urban when the rich and the poor are practically on top of each other. The extreme poverty and the extreme wealth showing up in the same geography.
And I've had some people ask, how can you do church in a setting like that? That's not going to work.
Yeah, are you going to be a rich church or are you going to be a poor church?
You can't be both. But I disagree with that. I feel that there's an opportunity there to be able to have people come that have a heart to serve, a heart to do ministry, a heart to share, to love, who may have means and may be from maybe a larger scale of finances or whatever, for those that are just starting out or trying to restart their lives from addiction and brokenness. I think we have a place where people can roll up their sleeves and get involved and
Yeah.
and help those that are around us.
Have you seen some examples in your church or your community of people who have a little more security and affluence, being in a meaningful connection to somebody who's more vulnerable?
Yes, we are beginning to see that, and we see that some. I'm earnestly praying for that to happen more as we go forward. But yes, there was some individuals just a few weeks ago who got talking to some folks in our church, and they were completely different circumstances from their background and where they live and their financial situation. And they said, well, let's do lunch. And they went out to lunch together,
Yeah.
which was beautiful. I'm seeing people in our church. We have executives that attend our church from different corporations and companies in our city. And they come to partner together and help each other and grow and learn despite socioeconomic backgrounds.
What I've experienced is that sometimes those who have more affluence and power sometimes have a bias towards the poor. And I've also seen the reverse, where those who are poor are very quick to be dismissive of those who have the money, the power, the affluence, and it's almost like, get away from me, you can't understand me. And perhaps sometimes the privileged person feeling at risk somehow, that by being around these people, you don't know what they're going to do. It always becomes us and them.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And that's a real pastoral challenge to help people grow to the middle. Right.
That's right.
So you've done some things in the neighborhood. One of them was involved craft dinner.
Yes.
And tell us about that incredible gift to the church, craft dinner.
Definitely. There's been several initiatives that we've embarked on, even in the last just 2 years, of trying to engage our community, invite our community in to events or to join us and celebrate different holidays or things, to just say, hey, we care. No big preaching, teaching, actually none of that. Just saying, hey, we just want to serve you, want to help you. So KD Day was one of those initiatives that a lot of churches in Canada have done or are doing. It's a simple concept. We serve craft dinner on Tuesday at noon for high school students. We have 2 high schools within a couple of blocks, one almost across the street, just diagonally up the street from us. And so we felt this was a need, that we have teens in our city and in our neighborhood who don't have a lot to eat. And more importantly, they needed a safe place, because we had a problem. We had about 30 teens gathering on our property for the last several years. They were getting into fights. It became a fight spot. Hey, if you want to beat somebody's face off, go behind Calvary Temple Church. Good spot there. It's secluded. You can beat them up, and it works well. A lot of drug use happening there. And we didn't want to just call the police. We wanted other solutions. Is there a safe place that they could gather? Well, they could come in our building. We have the room. So we pitched this idea and went forward with simply serving craft dinner Tuesday at noon. We've had up to 165 teens in our building at a time, eating and just being together. Again, there's no preaching, teaching, none of that. We're just there to serve, to love. Right. And it's taken off. I just got to say, it's so exciting, because we've had no budget for this. We have no money to do this at all. What's happened is the community has said, hey, that sounds like a good idea. That's a safe place for them to be. Keep them out of trouble. We're on board. So parent-teacher associations have jumped on board. The schools promoted and announced it. Businesses have come on board. Our own people from our church bring in the craft dinner. And we actually had to make an announcement about a month ago, please stop bringing in craft dinner. We have enough for the rest of this year, and we have money to do some of next year. We're doing great, thank you. And it shocked us.
Yeah.
But that desire to pitch together, help each other.
I don't know too many kids or teens that don't like craft dinner. I know when I was raising my boys, they could down a box single-handedly, and they didn't even have to cook it. Man, they were just loved it that much.
And it works great, because I told you we have a lot of seniors they know how to make craft dinner, and they can stir a pot, and they can
Yeah.
serve it out. So it's a way for them to be involved
Yeah.
and be a
Connecting
part.
the generations.
Oh yeah. And the special recipe that they use, I'm told, we have the best craft dinner in the city, and it's really creamy. They don't let it get dry and goopy. Apparently, it's supposed to be quite premium.
I think somebody needs to get you an endorsement from Kraft. I think that's what needs to happen here. So shifting the conversation a little bit, in December 2011, Maclean's magazine ranked St. John as the sexual assault capital of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, I hope that is changing. But in addition to being the sexual assault capital, there's been some significant community leaders that got busted for committing crimes against children.
Mm-hmm.
So here you're pastoring a church, you were a youth pastor. We've got this, our motive as churches when we come out to the community, we don't want to create usually a Jesus trap. We give you a hot dog so we can, close the door and preach at you. That's not a godly motive. A godly motive is we're coming out because we believe that we should love our neighbor, and that to show kindness and hospitality and concern and compassion is what we're made for, right?
Yes.
So, but then you have these crises that really affect people's trust. I'm not sending my kids to one of those churches.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what'll happen to them.
Yeah.
Or the scandals that we hear about all the time with priests and pastors and that always gets, I think, doubly amplified because they're supposed to be high trust individuals. They're supposed to be people that we can trust. And when they betray that trust, it's twice as heavy, I think, in terms of the impact that it makes on a community. So you've had to live through some scandals in the community. Talk to us about some of those scandals and how has that affected Calvary Temple?
It's been very difficult, specifically in our neighborhood. I remember about 8 or 9 years ago, we've actually had 3 young women who were raped that were associated with our church, and one of them was on the way home from youth group, which was really, really troubling because you think these people, feel like they should be involved in a church faith community, and they'll get out to be encouraged, and on their way back home they're attacked and just desecrated. And so it's very difficult to see that happen. I do see improvements, so there has been some change in our city, some initiatives and things to try to raise awareness and better education and support and help. But the scandals that then broke of leaders, people that were in trusted positions, and even people in municipal government that were supposed to be people of faith. And that was extremely difficult as well, because it's not only, well, this is a great official that's done this, but it's someone that's supposed to be someone following God. And so there's been a lot of distrust. It's been difficult to try to rebuild bridges with people to we're people of faith in Jesus, but we just want to love and serve you. We're not trying to entrap you, ensnare you, attack you, or do anything to harm you. And it's hard to convince people of that when they see this in several cases. People of trust that have attacked people and hurt them. It's been hard.
What would you say to somebody that's been victimized in that way? As a follower of Jesus, as somebody who says my life is about compassion, about loving my neighbor, what would you say to a victim? I mean, and I don't want you to obviously give names or anything like that, but you've probably had to be in that situation of responding to victims. So what's important?
Well, for me, my initial response is I'm so very sorry that happened, and that isn't the case for everyone that wants to serve. You begin to have a feeling from people in our neighborhood. What's the ulterior motive?
Yeah.
You're providing this service or this program, or you're here to do whatever. Why? What do you want? What's in it for you, Mr. Preacher Man? What's in it for you? And so I just try to communicate, I'm so very sorry that this has happened and this abuse has happened. And I try to and hope that through our consistent serving, loving example, I've been there for 14 and a half years. My wife and I are quite involved in our neighborhood and our community, and we pray that consistent example reminds that not everyone is going to abuse, going to hurt you, going to misuse you, and to just say, let's grow together. You teach me, I'll learn from you, and we'll walk together as a community to bring healing and trust again.
There's a story you told me about the time you had somebody from the street that came into one of your church services, and you have people that come, but this one particular time, tell me about the time when a bunch of people were lined up at the front of the church to pray, and what happened.
We have a variety of very colorful and exciting friends that join us at Calvary Temple Church in St. John. Among the staff, we have a joke that we're going to write a book someday called Only in Calvary Temple, highlighting some of the stories and exciting adventures. But yes, the day you mentioned, we were in a Sunday setting, in a worship service setting. I was at the keyboard on the stage. People were at the front praying and whatnot. And I saw this gentleman come in and walk in through the crowd and make his way to the front. And as we're singing a song together, he works the line of prayer to panhandle through the line. And I was kind of proud of our people, because a number of years ago, I wouldn't be shocked if he was escorted out quite quickly. You're not welcome here. Yeah. But I was kind of proud because our people graciously, just tried to say, no, we're here praying, And a few people gave him a few bucks or whatever, and he kind of moved on. But that was quite a snapshot of where we are and who we are.
Yeah.
That we're people of faith trying to love God and serve, and we're in an area with some very raw needs, some very real needs of desperation. And this guy saw an opportunity. Hey, maybe I can get a bite to eat, and so he works the line of prayer. But that's just the reality of where we are.
Yeah, what a reality. It could be a reality TV show, I'm sure. Do you ever have a boring day?
Very rarely. I mean, there was one meeting I was in, and in the middle of the meeting, the police burst through and ran through the building. They were chasing someone that had snatched someone's purse just out front, and it's a happening place. It's an exciting place, but it's funny because I'm a country boy. Mm-hmm. So initially when I went there, I was petrified to barely get out of my car and run to the door of the church and get in, and just so rural perspective.
Yep.
And I thought, I can't do this. But God stretches you.
Yeah.
And you change. Your heart changes. And now I know people on a first name basis. And, I see lives changing and people's hearts melting from my heart and folks that I work with, as well as our guests and our friends in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to see that happen. And at this point, which I didn't say before, we have the most people that are attending the church from our neighborhood, people that are growing in their faith and really plugged in and involved and now leading in our church, in our neighborhood, from the geographic region right around the church.
I think that's probably the way it should be. Yeah. And when you talk about being a country boy, being afraid when you first showed up 14 years ago, what was it that changed what you were afraid, what you used to be afraid of, to what are you afraid of now?
Oh wow. I think it's probably the fear of the unknown. Initially, you just you don't know. It felt like a really big city to me. I mean, St. John is not a big city, 125,000 people, but to me it was huge.
Yeah.
It was unknown. It was new. And then as you begin to work, if I can say, in the trenches of life, and learning and growing, and through experiences like panhandlers working through a church event and whatever, you learn and grow and get to know people's stories, get to know them more. So in my current role, I'd say what scares me now is more of how can we make this mission church, because we're realizing more now than ever, we are a mission.
Yeah.
We're not your traditional Burby church or whatever. We are a mission point right in the heart of our city. How can we make that work financially? How can it be viable going forward to best serve, to serve more? We don't even want to just be what we have been the last, 20 or 30 years, kind of a soup kitchen kind of place occasionally. Want to be more than that. How can we really help people build their lives from the ground up? In skills training, in things that will sustain them, give them food security, and help them going forward to strengthen their lives and help them in practical ways and spiritual ways.
Yeah. If the church closed tomorrow, would it make a difference to your neighbors?
I would firmly say yes, and I'm trying to take a look from stepping back, not just initial, oh yes, of course. But when I think about it, there are so many churches that have closed in our neighborhood. It's extremely expensive to do business in the inner city. We're in a huge, big old building. It's like just taking money and throwing it in the wind when we turn the heat on in the winter. There's no insulation in a lot of the building. We've tried to fortify that, fix that, but it's difficult in a 100-year-old building. There's some significant... there's some real significant challenges there. I've completely lost my train of thought. Help me out.
Yeah, I know. You start worrying about money, and it just blocks everything else out.
True enough.
Yeah.
Okay, remind me what your initial question was.
So yeah, just the things that you're afraid of.
Yeah, well, the whole mission part, that we are a mission place trying to rebuild people's lives, and just how do we best do that? Because we want to holistically help people, not just cause more problems, a short-term little help that'll really cause them more problems going forward.
How do you actually be systemic in a way that brings life into your city, right?
I think that the spiritual part is a big part of it. I think that we do offer foundationally and first a relationship with Jesus Christ and discipleship to grow believers, build believers who then build more believers in Christ. That would be the first thing. But we're learning right now, how can we better serve? We need some skills development programs in our setting, in our facility, in our organization. There are some opportunities we hope going forward to help in more practical ways to give financial knowledge or education for personal finance building and cooking classes, and some practical things that will help people. Because my own experience with my parents, they had to learn how to be parents. They came from a difficult situation in their own lives, and I think back to their stories to me. They had to be educated through mentoring on how to be a parent, how to do personal finances, how to cook. All those practical things. People still need that today. How can we in my organization provide that and help in that regard? That's what I hope we can accomplish.
Yeah. Chad, it's been really great talking to you, and I can't wait to one day visit St. John, come to Calvary Temple and walk around the neighborhood with you, and keep doing what you're doing. I asked the question, would the neighborhood notice if you closed tomorrow? Let me just respond by saying everything I'm hearing, you're not closing tomorrow. And the challenges that you face are part of discovering what form will we take going forward, and what do we value above all else. And it can't be our buildings, because they decay and dilapidate, and it has to be about the people that God loves. And so thank you so much. I'm learning a lot listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was Chad Nickerson from St. John, New Brunswick. You know that craft dinner idea where they wanted to open their doors to high school students? Well, since the time we recorded, they did that, and they've been averaging 110 students coming out to it. Sometimes the simplest idea becomes a beautiful gift to the community. Hey, thanks for listening to this podcast and sharing it with others. We're now at over 1,600 RSS subscribers year to date. And congratulations to Sarah, who guessed closest to the date when we would reach 1,000 subscribers. She won a Starbucks card. Let me tell you some things that are coming up on Sidewalk Skyline. For the next 4 or 5 episodes, we're going to do a series called Gangland Preachers, looking at ministries in the Toronto area that have significant gang-affiliated youth connections. Our first gangland preacher is Olu Jegede, the pastor of Christian Center Church. The Jane Finch corridor has been a hot spot for many years, and you're going to hear how one of the churches there is thriving in a place that other people might stay away from. Then in following weeks, we're going to hear from Dr. Anthony Hutchinson of Tyndale University, Mark Goring from Church in Regent Park, and the king of pimp exit strategies, E.J. Tupe. So if you haven't yet subscribed, go to your podcast provider and you can listen to all of our episodes, past, present, and future. In this time when our city's sidewalks are not so busy, be safe, people. And until next time, keep one ear to God and another to the streets in your city. I'm Kevin Rogers, and you've been listening to Sidewalk Skyline Podcast.